Number 1. Humans only use 10% of their brain. This myth is like that one guy who peaked in high school and just refuses to leave. The claim is that humans only use 10% of their brains, meaning 90% is just sitting there doing absolutely nothing. Apparently, evolution spent millions of years building the most complex object in the known universe and then went, nope, nope, let's leave most of it unplugged. Think about how ridiculous that sounds. Your brain controls your movement, your senses, your memories, your emotions, and your ability to recognize your mom. Also, don't forget about your ability to remember that embarrassing thing 5 years ago at 3 in the morning. Brain scans show activity all over the brain throughout the day. Different regions handle different jobs, but they're all doing something. In fact, damage to even small parts of the brain can cause major problems. That is not what you'd expect if 90% of it was just decorative. If 90% of your brain suddenly stopped working, you wouldn't unlock psychic powers. You would 100% unlock a hospital bill instead. So unfortunately, no secret genius mode, no telekinesis, and no becoming the next superhuman. You're already using your brain, sometimes more successfully than others. Number 2. Goldfish have a 3-second memory. Goldfish have been victims of the most successful slander campaign in animal history. People think they forget everything every 3 seconds. You know how insulting that is. Imagine somebody walking up to you every few seconds and saying, "Hi, do you remember me?" Like you're suffering a system reboot every time you blink. The myth became so popular that people started using goldfish as the universal symbol for bad memory. But researchers have actually trained goldfish to recognize patterns, navigate simple mazes, and respond to specific signals. Some experiments have shown they can remember things for months. That is a pretty impressive memory for an animal whose entire house is basically a glass bowl. And honestly, if your home was a transparent cylinder sitting next to a microwave, you'd probably be distracted too. The funniest part is that humans love making fun of goldfish memory, while constantly forgetting passwords, birthdays, where they parked, and why they walked into a room. Imagine being roasted by a species that has to click forgot password every other week. Goldfish deserves a public apology. Number 3. Bats are blind. Bats have spent decades dealing with some of the worst misinformation in the animal kingdom. People hear the word echolocation and immediately picture a bat flying around like a furry missile with no idea where it is going. But bats aren't blind. Many species can see surprisingly well. Echolocation is just an extra tool they use to navigate and hunt. It is basically nature's version of installing bonus features. Think about it. Humans have eyesight. Bats have eyesight and biological sonar. That is not a downgrade. That is an upgrade. It is like calling a fighter jet useless because it also has radar. Some bats can even recognize landmarks and navigate huge distances using multiple senses at the same time. Meanwhile, humans can get lost in a shopping mall after taking one wrong turn. So, no, bats aren't blind. They're basically flying mammals that looked at nature and said, "I'll take every navigation package available." Number 4. The Great Wall of China is visible from space. This is one of those facts that sounds so cool that nobody bothered checking if it was true. The Great Wall of China is enormous. It stretches for thousands of miles, so naturally people started saying you can see it from space. Then the myth spread everywhere. Textbooks repeated it, teachers repeated it, students repeated it. At this point, the myth probably traveled farther than the wall itself. Here is the problem. The wall is long, but it is also relatively narrow. And from orbit, it blends into the surrounding landscape. Astronauts have repeatedly explained that spotting it is extremely difficult. You know what is easier to see? Massive cities, road networks, airports, huge human-made structures that actually stand out. The Great Wall isn't some giant glowing line wrapped around Earth like a sci-fi movie. It is just an incredibly impressive wall. And honestly, surviving for centuries across mountains is already cool enough without giving it superhero powers. Number 5. Bulls hate the color red. Cartoons have done irreversible damage to public knowledge. A matador waves a red cape. The bull charges. Everyone watches this happen and concludes that bulls must absolutely hate the color red. Seems reasonable. Except, it's wrong. Bulls are actually colorblind to red. The color itself doesn't make them angry. What grabs their attention is the movement. As the cape moves, the bull reacts. You could even replace the cape with a pink towel, a blue blanket, or a giant sheet of tax paperwork. If it's flapping around in front of an already agitated bull, you're getting the same result. The bull isn't sitting there analyzing colors like an angry interior designer. It's responding to motion. Honestly, that is probably worse. At least if it hated red, you could just wear a different shirt. Instead, the real lesson is much simpler. If you're standing in front of an angry bull waving literally anything, your day is about to become educational. Number 6. Lightning never strikes the same place twice. This myth sounds incredibly wise. It's the kind of thing somebody says while staring dramatically into the distance. The problem is, reality doesn't care how poetic something sounds. Lightning absolutely strikes the same place more than once. In fact, it does it all the time. Tall buildings get hit repeatedly every year. The Empire State Building gets struck dozens of times annually. If lightning followed this rule, skyscrapers would basically become immune after the first hit. But that is not how electricity works. Lightning follows the easiest path. It doesn't keep a notebook. It doesn't have a memory. It's not floating around the clouds saying, "Sorry, already hit that one last year." Nature doesn't care about fairness. Nature barely cares about your plans. So, if somebody tells you lightning never strikes the same place twice, remember that lightning itself clearly never got the memo. Number 7. Sugar makes kids hyperactive. For decades, sugar has been blamed for crimes it may not have committed. Kid running around the house? Sugar. Kid yelling at maximum volume? Sugar. Boy, you know who's going to be blamed. But when researchers actually started studying the idea, the evidence wasn't nearly as dramatic as people expected. Study after study struggled to find the legendary sugar rush that everyone talks about. So, why does the myth survive? Because people usually encounter sugar at events that are already complete chaos. Birthday parties, holiday celebrations, family gatherings, you name it. Places packed with excitement, noise, games, gifts, and other children. Of course, the kids are energetic. They're basically attending a tiny festival designed specifically for them. The cupcake just happens to be standing closest to the scene of the crime. That's like blaming a campfire for a forest full of screaming campers. Sugar became the easiest suspect, not necessarily the guilty one. Number 8. Chameleons change color to match their backgrounds. If cartoons were accurate, chameleons would basically be biological Photoshop. Put it on a red object, it turns red. Put it on a blue object, it turns blue. Put it on a rainbow object. Suddenly your mind is blown. But reality is actually much more interesting. Chameleons often change color to communicate. They can signal aggression, show fear, attract mates, warn rivals, or help regulate body temperature. In other words, they're not trying to disappear. They're expressing themselves. They're basically walking emotional status updates. Some color changes can happen incredibly fast depending on what the animal is experiencing. So when a chameleon changes color, it is often sending a message rather than trying to blend into the wallpaper, which is honestly a lot like social media. Humans don't change colors when they're angry, scared, confident, or looking for attention. We just post about it instead. If you learned something new, please give a like and subscribe for more.